Benvenuti, signori e signori. Welcome everyone back to the BSR for our next BSR hybrid event, another City of Rome lecture. And it's an absolute delight to see all these people here in the room and everyone else tuning in across the globe, whether you're in the UK or elsewhere. My name's Emlyn Dodd. For those that don't know me, I'm the Assistant Director for Archaeology here, and I'm very excited to introduce tonight's lecture by my phenomenal colleague, Stephen Kay. Before I introduce Steve, a few brief reminders. For those watching online, please be aware that tonight's lecture is being recorded. And for those that wish to ask any questions, we'll have time at the end of the lecture. If you're here in person, feel free to put your hand in the air and we can bring a microphone around to you. And for those online, you can enter questions at any time in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So this evening, Steve will be speaking on geophysical prospection on the Eastern Caelian, leading us on what I'm sure will be a masterful journey of large-scale diachronic urban archaeological research, and in particular, exciting new work by the ERC-funded Rome Transformed project, of which the BSR is a partner. Steve's impressive and lengthy resume needs no introduction, and he's familiar to many here at and associated with the BSR. He's currently our archaeological manager at the school and also holds visiting posts at Newcastle and Southampton universities, and is also a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries. Steve's extensive fieldwork and research in geophysical prospection stretches right back to the 1990s when he was involved in the BSR's work in central Italy, and since then has collaborated with and directed fieldwork throughout Italy and across the Eastern Mediterranean and in Africa. He's published extensively on archaeological survey, excavation and geophysics, and at last glance has a staggering 70+ publications uploaded to academia. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker tonight, Stephen Kay.
Thank you, Emlyn, for that very kind and generous introduction. Let's get straight into it. It gives me great pleasure this evening to discuss the preliminary results from the geophysical surveys led by the British School at Rome as part of the Rome Transform project. Launched in October 2019, the research is funded as an advance grant from the European Research Council and brings together colleagues from the University of Newcastle, Università degli Studi di Firenze, the British School at Rome, and the Consiglio Nazionale delle Ricerche. There we go. The work that I discussed this evening represents one of the largest geophysical surveys attempted in a densely populated urban area. This required us to bring together a highly skilled team with some of the leading practitioners in Italy and elsewhere. And this evening, I will particularly draw upon the work of my colleagues, Salvatore Piero of the Consiglio Nazionale delle Ricerche and Gianfranco Morelli of the company GeoStudi Astier. The work of the BSR that I present this evening has been undertaken by myself with my colleague, Elena Poma. The Rome Transform project is an interdisciplinary analysis of the political, military, and religious regenerations of the Eastern Caelian Hill in Rome between the 1st and 8th centuries AD, from the Principate of Augustus to the Pontificate of Leo III. From the extravagant haughty, the houses of elite families, through successive imperial palaces to the seat of papal governance, the area's architecture embodies the changing expressions of political power. From the early military stations through the grandeur of the barracks of the Emperor's Horse Guards to the building and rebuilding of the Aurelian walls, it reveals notions about the intersection of security and military power. From the temples and the shrines unfounded under the Republic to the world's first cathedral, it attests successive religious regenerations. In order to map these changes across the 13.7 kilometer squared study area, the project is conducting archival analysis and bibliographic research, as well as undertaking an extensive program of new fieldwork, including geophysical prospection, of which I will talk this evening, deep environmental coring, and structural analysis through visual phasing, chemical sampling, laser scanning, photogrammetry, and structural from motion using drone recording. This information is being analyzed alongside the wealth of data held within the Archaeological GIS database of Rome's archaeological authority, the Soprintendenza Speciale Archeologica, Belle Arti e Paesaggio di Roma. Previously, the principal investigators of the project, Professors Ian Haynes and Paolo Livorani, conducted a long-term research on the Basilica of St. John Lateran, published by the BSR in 2020. The Lateran, taken that as a starting point, was to the west. The new project has investigated some of the major monuments in this area, such as the Neronian Aqueduct, the 1.5 kilometers of the Aurelian walls, which you can see running along the back there, along Via Carla Felice, and as well also to the final part where we see now in the video, the area of the Caesarean Palace complex at the site of Santa Croce in Jerusalem. The aim of the geophysical surveys is to assist in investigating the near surface, to understand the appearance and transformation of the area over 800 years, covering 68 hectares in a central urbanized area. The areas identified as suitable for prospection were divided into subgroups based upon the most appropriate method, given a number of different parameters that can affect each technique. This evening, I will focus on some of the areas indicated in red, surveyed with a single channel ground penetrating radar, which I'll abbreviate through this talk as a GPR, and some of those in blue, which have been investigated with both GPR and electrical resistance tomography, which I will henceforth relate to as ERT, so GPR and ERT. I will not dwell in this lecture upon the specifics of the different types of geophysical prospection and the techniques that have been used. There is excellent and long literature on this amazing topic and subject, which is something we specialize in at the BSR for a number of years. I've spoken on a number of occasions about the different techniques we do, and I'm very happy to speak to our citizen course students about this should they wish, but this evening I shan't dwell upon the specifics of these techniques. It's sufficient to note that the majority of the work was conducted using different antennas and configurations of the ground penetrating radar, as it is this instrument which is best suited to modern urban investigations. However, in some areas, this data was enhanced with ERT, so this is the electrical resistance tomography. Before I begin our journey across the Caelian Hill, I would like to note some of the different types, I would like to note some of the difficulties faced in this form of investigation in a modern city, which is why this survey is so complex, but it's quite unique. It is clear from any brief glance at ancient cartography, such as Noli's incredibly precise map of Rome of 1748, the changes that occurred to the topography of the city inside the Aurelian walls. Indeed, one of the aims of the project, led by Margherita Azzari at the University degli Studi di Firenze, is to begin to map these changes in the topography in a 3D environment. From a geophysical perspective, the changes in the topography present a significant challenge. Topographical features such as Monte Cipollaro to the east have been flattened. This was removed on the order of Pope Benedict XIV between 1741 and 1744, as it hindered the view of the church of Santa Croce from the Lateran. Whilst to the west, the modern Via Emanuele Filiberto and the underlying metro cuts through the Caelian Hill. So this therefore limited our choice in the techniques we had available, there with a particular need for low frequency GPR antennas. These in particular, as they offer a greater depth of penetration, but although at a loss of some resolution, and then also with the widely spaced profiles of ERT. Other parameters that can affect the effectiveness of the data that we've collected, I've listed here. These include unmapped modern surfaces, which is unfortunately a common problem for archaeologists in Rome, and can lead to these pipelines masking deeper archaeological structures, as well as the metal of these pipes significantly disturbing the electromagnetic waves. The long period of habitation inside the Aurelian walls also creates a significant challenge, as the city has a deep stratigraphy with numerous chronological phases, which are difficult to separate within individual geophysical data set. I should also mention the sheer complexity of working in Rome and the difficulties of obtaining permits to work within the capital city. And I should acknowledge the tremendous work which has made our work possible by my colleagues on the team, as well as the help and assistance we have had from the Sovrintendenza and the Soprintendenza in Rome. The first area that I would like to discuss, the new results of our research, is the piazza in front of Basilica of San Giovanni in Laterano, which is the area I've highlighted in red on this slide. The Rome Transform project stems from a previous investigation of Basilica. The research strategy and the methodology of that project have gone a long way to structuring this new ERC-funded project. The project uses high-resolution data capture and digitally aided interpretation for analysis and to support more traditional scholarly approaches. This form of recording allows the visualization of structures that are otherwise cut and decontextualized by later interventions. The recording leads to the development of 3D models, termed by the project as provocations, that are aimed at encouraging wider discussion. The geophysics forms an important element in this process, as it allows the exploration of the subsurface across an extensive area, which would otherwise be invisible. In brief, the first archaeological evidence we have of occupation underneath the Basilica of San Giovanni Laterano is a wealthy residence of the 1st century AD, the full style decoration of which suggests a Neronian date. Of importance to a geophysical survey is the depth of these structures beneath the current basilica, an average of 5.5 meters. The buildings were later replaced by the second barrack complex of the Equites Singulares under the Emperor Septimius Severus, constructed around AD 193. At the beginning of the 4th century, these structures were cut to make way for the Constantinian Basilica. The new project has included re-examination of these areas explored with geophysics in the earlier iteration of this research, in particular to extend the survey to a greater depth, as mapping the changing topography of the area is of crucial importance to the project. Before I begin to show some results of the project, I should quickly note how this data should be read. The GPR data is collected as a radiogram, that is a vertical profile into the ground. Through the collection of numerous profiles in irregular traverses, which kind of illustrating up here, either simultaneously, as in the case of a multi-channel system, or as an individual profiles when using a single channel system, it is possible to build up a volume of data that can subsequently be resampled horizontally, where the thickness of each size can be varied. So this idea here. Together with various assessments for the potential rate of the radar through the soil, it's possible to give an approximate depth. Therefore, as I show you the data this evening we have collected, these should essentially be read as a map. Whilst it collected slightly differently, the same methodology applies to the ERT in terms of the collection in vertical profiles and then a subsequent horizontal reslicing. So here we have our first example of what I'm asking you to look at essentially in plan. The earlier survey with GPR by Salvatore Piro had been very successful, recording a range of features directly in front of the current basilica, revealing probable parts of the triclinium of the Patriarchum built on the order of Pope Leo III. However, the GPR had limited penetration beyond 2.5 meters. We know from the considerable mapping undertaken in the former project, to which I just referred, that Republican houses that are under Basilica can be at a considerable greater depth. So the houses we were talking about are underneath in this area here, and we're in the piazza just in front of it. Therefore, the piazza, which in this area here, was resurveyed by the new project with a lower frequency antenna. This 70 megahertz antenna, however, similarly had some problems in terms of the penetration beyond 2.5 meters. Unfortunately, this can be caused by highly conductive layers, in particular due to the high moisture content that can lead to a significant attenuation of the signal. Therefore, in order to assess the area at a great depth, it was also investigated using ERT. At a depth of 4.9 meters below ground level, the ERT recorded areas of high resistance. So seen here on your color scale in the area in what is in red towards black. In particular, these are shown up towards the eastern edge of the piazza. The substantial nature of these areas of high resistance may perhaps indicate accumulations of material or changes to the topography in front of the basilica. Continuing a further 2 meters in depth from that previous example, the horizontal data slice of the ERT is showing both the continuation of these areas of high resistance in red, as well as large pockets of low resistance. In this case, towards the blue-purple areas, which you can see, which can be caused by fine or wet material, or indeed backfilled cavities. The next step for us was therefore to compare this data with the historical cartography of the area and to drill a series of environmental cores at key points within the piazza. And in this section here, and this core here, I'm drawing heavily on the work of my colleagues Carlo Rosa, Francesco Carbone, Gianfranco Morelli, Filippo Bailey. A comparison of the ERT with the cores indicates that the areas of low resistance may be related to quarrying activities for red pozzolana. So we're looking at this depth here. Here's the location of our core. I'm not sure which is over here on our screen. Further, so in this, okay, the formation of which has been noted here. So this formation of this red pozzolana is being noted here in the area of this part of the Caelian Hill, but also elsewhere. In correspondence to the core which I've indicated here, we also have an area of high resistance, which is up here. Amongst which in the core, which I show on the bottom side here in this section here, we also have some archaeological material. Therefore, a current working hypothesis for the team is that based on the low resistivity values of the ERT, and then the higher value on the edges as well, and the material which is coming out from inside the environmental core, is that this may be related to a collapsed pozzolana quarrying tunnels. This phenomenon of the quarrying of tunnels for pozzolana in this area of the Caelian, as I said, has been seen elsewhere. The next stage in this work would be to use the data recovered from the cores, of which 3 were drilled in this area, to identify the horizons recorded in the ERT, and use this information to reconstruct the ancient topography of the area. Moving eastwards from the Basilica of San Giovanni, the next open area investigated by the project were the gardens of Villa Volkonski, now the current residence of the British ambassador to Italy and San Marino, Again, I take the opportunity to thank the embassy staff, and in particular Allegra, for the extraordinary support and hospitality that they have shown the team. So again, we're now in the area shown in red on this slide. At the northeastern corner, just outside the property of the embassy, are a row of Republican tombs, the earliest dated to the 1st century BC, of which I believe you as the students of the City of Rome course probably visited last Tuesday. These tombs and the Via Caeliamontana onto which they faced provide us with a useful marker as to the ground level of the late Republican period. Inside the grounds of Villa Volkonski is the columbarium of Tiberius Claudius Vitalis, dated on archaeological, paleographic, and onomastic grounds to the Claudian period. Discovered by accident in 1866 following the collapse of the vault, the structure was immediately excavated by Ginocchio Ersoc. The tomb, over 3 levels, the lowest of which is the hypogeum, is well preserved and can be identified thanks to inscription in the facade. Of particular interest for the geophysical prospection is the depth of the road in front of the monument. Whilst the road level, as you can see in the slide on the top right, seems to have been raised several times since antiquity, the imperial ground level is approximately 8 meters below the modern ground surface. A further indication of the significant change in ground level is provided by the subsidiary branch of the Aqua Claudia, built under Nero, that began at Porta Maggiore and traverses the length of the village ground for a distance of 370 meters, with 36 standing arches. The branch begins at Porta Maggiore, a few hundred meters to the east of the villa, where most of the aqueducts feed into Rome, as this was one of the highest points of the city. The Neronian aqueduct is one of the principal monuments of the Caelian Hill, as it crosses the length of the study area towards Piazza San Giovanni Laterano, onwards to Piazza della Navicella, where it turns above the Arch of Silanus and Dolabella, or the Porta Caeliamontana, which was discussed here in a lecture a few weeks ago by Rita Volpe discussing Serbian walls, before it turns and heads towards the Temple of Claudius and feeds into the Nymphaeum along the side of the temple complex. The aqueduct has been extensively recorded using laser scanner, drone photography, which you'll see in here, and standing building survey. But it is the accumulation of material around the aqueduct that has a strong influence on the geophysical prospection. In this drone footage here, made by colleagues from the University of Siena, the upper part of the aqueduct is clearly visible, whilst from access points alongside the aqueduct, it is known to continue for a depth of at least 8 meters, like the columbarium we just saw to the north. The final section, as you saw in this short video, shows the gardens on the southern side of the aqueduct, where the GPR survey was conducted. So again, going back to what I said before, we're reading the GPR here in plan, so reading as a map, so looking kind of virtually down on it. The GPR survey in this area, because of the depth of which I've just referred, was undertaken using a 200 megahertz antenna by the BSR with a line separation of 50 centimeters. For orientation, the aqueduct is running here from left to right. So this is the feature cone left to right. With Villa Volkonski, it's just off the screen in the bottom left. Many of the high amplitude features, which you can see here, and this time I'm showing to you in yellow, relate to the modern layouts of former gardens, such as the pathways. So what you're looking at here, we should go on to here for people online. What we're looking at here is a series of pathways, again over here, and again, things over here is another pathway. And also here, which is probably relating to the modern irrigation of the gardens. However, is a depth of 1.6, 1.7 meters calculated through an estimated depth calculated through the georadar. Now we do have some potential archaeological features begin to show here. And that's where hopefully you can see online as well, where we're showing with my cursor. The proximity of these to the aqueduct, as well as their form, suggests some structural elements. These will form part of a continued investigation through the comparison of the laser scan data and the structural recorded with structure from motion from the drone footage, which you've just seen. Continuing our journey east, we next move on to a series of monumental buildings that formed part of a vast imperial villa of the late Severan period, known as the Caesarean Palace, identified in the area as Santa Croce in Jerusalem. Similarly to the area under San Giovanni Laterano, the area until the 3rd century AD was initially one of luxury gardens, these luxury horti, before they passed it into imperial ownership. Work begun under Septimius Severus with a large bath and colonnaded portico. So I should have moved it on to here. And was further transformed under Agelaudus to an imperial residence. A circus was later added under Caracalla, who was known for his love of chariot racing, but which was cut off a short time later by the construction of the Aurelian Wall in AD 271 to 75. The other monuments appear to date to the 4th century AD, when the property was taken up by Constantine as his place of residence, and from where it gets his name Caesarean, simply meaning a place of residence. The area under Constantine became multifunctional, with public areas such as the Basilica Civile, to which I shall return shortly. Whilst the project is investigating a number of areas within this complex, which are all highlighted here in grey. For this evening, my talk will just focus on 3 areas: the aforementioned Basilica, which is in this area here. Oops, doing it again. In this area here, the Amphitheater, highlighted in red, and an area next to the Aurelian walls, just to the east of the Amphitheater. Perhaps one of the lesser known amphitheaters in Rome, the 3rd century AD Amphitheatrum Castrensis is now quite unassuming. In part, it was later incorporated into the Aurelian Wall. The structure is well preserved up until the 16th century, but was later reduced, as in this drawing here from our own BSR library by Giovanni, as it was reduced for defensive needs. Built on a high point at Santa Croce, has an ellipse shape, the maximum measurements of which are 88 meters in length, 75.8 meters in width, with a circumference of 252 meters. Although now little is preserved of the cava, it is estimated to accommodate around 3,500 spectators. Its inclusion into the Aurelian Wall some 50 years later, so 50 years after its construction, probably by then it had since lost its function. The GPR survey conducted inside the amphitheater by the BSR was undertaken using a 400 megahertz antenna, so a slightly shallower form of antenna than the ones we've seen elsewhere, such as at Villa Volkonski. And this, as you can see here in the middle photograph, allows us to have a tighter line separation. So the areas here were surveyed at a regular interval of 25 centimeters. The area was first surveyed using GPS and total station in order to establish a precise grid within real-world coordinates. I should say the recording of all the project surveys, both geophysical, topographical, and coring, with GPS has been fundamental, as is this accurate recording which will allow the integration of all these data sets collected by the project and the analysis of all these data sets within the 3D GIS. The survey, in particular in the northeastern corner, has recorded a number of high amplitude linear features, which may be associated to structural support for the arena or the cava, which again, as I said, which was demolished in the 16th century. So in particular, I'm focusing on, say, northeastern area, on these structures up here, and some traces a little bit in this this slice of the data at 0.7 to 0.9, this one to 0.6 to 0.8 meters below the ground level. We're showing some features in this area here, which I'm indicating, and in particular, we're interested in this area up here. Placing a slice of this data, this one here recorded between 0.7 and 0.9 meters, alongside the best preserved plan we have of the amphitheater, drawn by Palladio in the 16th century, it is possible to see how the features may be related to supporting walls or service corridors underneath the arena. This hypothesis may also fit with the approximately positioned excavations in the center of the amphitheater noted by Lanciani, which I indicated here, if you can see them in dark red. By Lanciani, who noted in Rovine e Scavi di Roma Antica that the arena actually had been excavated 6 times. However, curiously, he also notes that in an excavation of 1828, these excavations concluded with no results. At the northern end, parts of the lower section of the amphitheater are still accessible and were recently laser scanned by the project. And here we are grateful for the assistance given to us by the group Roma Sotterranea, who helped give us access in safety to these areas underneath the amphitheater. However, so our interest in here was obviously to record the structures of the amphitheater underneath, and also to compare the structures and their depth with the GPR survey. This area here, which you can see on the bottom right of your screen in these images from the article of Corley et al., which I've cited at the bottom, were probably those which were recorded by Ficcorini in Roma Antica of 1744, when he speaks of a priest who in 1740 discovered the crypt and said it was largely full of animal bones, so which probably relates to, say, to this area here. The next phase of our analysis in this area will be to assess these geophysical features, so the ones I've just showed you in this previous slide in the northwest corner, together with the structural analysis of the standing walls, and which have been recorded by the laser scanning or within a GIS environment, to see if we can look at the changing levels within our GPR data and that of the laser scanning. Leaving the amphitheater and moving 100 meters east along the Aurelian wall, so moving 100 meters east towards the Aurelian wall, the next area investigated by the BSI using GPR survey was a small football pitch at the rear of the Domus Soriana Hotel. So that's again indicated here in red. Archaeologically, the area is noted for the presence of a long covered corridor, more than 300 meters in length and 14.5 meters wide, that extended from the amphitheater along the large hall that was later transformed into the Basilica Santa Croce on all the way to the circus. So the long corridor structure, as you can see here. From the depths of the area recorded by an ERT survey and an environmental core on the northern side of the corridor, so within this area here where I have my pointer, which is inside the area of the circus, which is the one I mentioned before, which was later cut by the Aurelian Moors. The area, this new area was surveyed with, again, with a 200 megahertz GPR antenna. Despite the high amplitude despite some areas of high amplitude, which are recorded upon the western edge of the survey, so on your kind of left-hand side of your screen, which were probably, as an estimate, which are probably caused by the construction of that building to the west, the survey appears to have recorded a high amplitude feature alongside the Aurelian wall. And I'm referring to this area, so the high amplitude, which I'm referring to, are these areas in black, with some areas of lower amplitude in white around it. So this is the structure which was recorded by the survey unexpectedly, of which obviously we're extremely interested. The position of the structure close to a tower on the outside of the wall, so which is just here, raises interesting questions as to its function. And indeed, its estimated depth from the GPR at 2.8 to 3 meters may even suggest an earlier structure. As noted by my colleagues, it is possible that the Aurelian wall was built to avoid the structure, given the curious nature of the construction of the Aurelian wall in this section. The final area I'd like to present in this brief tour of the Eastern Caelian Hill is a large apsidal hall in the grounds of the former Caserme dei Granatieri and now the Museo Stadico della Fanteria. The structure, which is here, the structure, dated on the basis of its construction technique to the Constantinian period, is erroneously known as the Temple of Venus and Cupid, on the basis of the discovery of the famous portrait statue of Sallusta Obiana, wife Alexander Servius, represented as Venus. In this drawing on the left-hand side of 1619 by Giovanni, again from the BSR library, it can be seen the state of ruin of the structure and how much the building already been spoliated in the 17th century. Once we have some information from the published 2013-14 excavations conducted inside the apse of the Basilica, the potential continuation of the building to the west has only been hypothesized. Therefore, given the small size of this area, see from the scale within here, it was decided to investigate this area with multiple types of antennae, each offering us a different depth penetration. This selected depth size shows the area an estimated depth of 0.5 to 0.7 meters, recorded with a 400 megahertz antenna. The areas were investigated separately due to different ground surface, including sempitrini, grass, and gravel. Whilst the antenna recorded a number of features, the majority of these appear to relate to modern amenities and old paths, as well as the 19th century landscaping of the gardens, which raised the ground level. So I'm referring again to this high amplitude, which you see in black. So this area here are related to modern paths, and again, in this slightly separate area over here, it relates to paths which have since been removed. And then you have these sort of parallel lines down here, which relate to modern amenities. A smaller area was also surveyed with a 200 megahertz antenna, but similarly to the 400, recorded some subsurface features, but also at a very shallow depth. So again, these darker features here, which we interpret as being modern. As was recorded by the excavation inside the apse, the location of which is highlighted here in the red box in the upper right. So just, you can see it just up here. The preparation of the floor surface in opus sectile was recorded at a depth of 46.29 meters above sea level. The ground level in this area, as recorded by our GPS survey, is around 50 meters, a difference of 3.71 meters. Therefore, beyond the depth penetration, we were achieving with either 200 or 500 megahertz antennas. In order to continue our investigations at a deeper level, the area was also surveyed by my colleague Salvatore Fiero with a 17 megahertz antenna. While similar results were recorded in the upper levels, at an estimated depth of 3.8 to 4 meters, The 70 megahertz antenna highlighted areas of high amplitude in the southwest corner, particularly focusing in this area here. And more or less in line with the hypothesized southern wall of the Basilica Civile. Moreover, some features on the northwest-southeast alignment recorded at very southern limits of the survey, so down here. To test this result further, a small ERT survey was also conducted in the grass in front of the apse, the parameters of which are shown in this slide. Each probe location was individually recorded by GPS in order to topographically correct the data. At a similar depth to the 70 megahertz antenna, so that's around 3.5 to 4 meters below the modern ground level, the ERT recorded 2 parallel areas of high resistance, interestingly in correspondence with the hypothesized northern and southern walls of the Basilica on this plan. The depth also corresponds with the floor surface of the Basilica, which was recorded in this small excavation to the southeast at 3.7 meters. Furthermore, at a depth of between 6 and 6.5 meters, the areas of high resistance continued to be recorded, perhaps indicating that the wall foundation continued for a approximate depth of another 2 meters beyond the floor surface, feasible given the height of the standing structure. When comparing the generated depth slice with a topographically corrected pseudo section of an ERT, it can be seen that the major areas of high resistance correspond with the hypothesized location of the walls. Other pockets in the upper part, so where I have my cursor, of high resistance may have also been caused by the destruction layers, which include rubble. So thinking back to that drawing of Giovanni, and also within the excavation conducted inside the apse, which recorded layers of rubble in the upper areas. The areas I presented this evening are just a small sample of the ongoing geophysical investigations. The data from other areas around the basilicas at Santa Croce and San Giovanni are in the course of being analysed by colleagues from CNR. Whilst the survey of the 3.5 kilometres of roads around the Caelian Hill, seen here, has been completed by colleagues from GeoStudi Astier using a multi-channel system. This represents an enormous data set in a very archaeologically rich area of this part of the Eastern Caelian Hill, and will require some time to process. The road network, in many ways, offers the most extensive window we have in the area into the subsoil. However, an analysis complicated by many of the factors that I listed at the beginning of this presentation, in particular the unmapped utilities and the routes of the public transport. So this survey is recently completed, and our analysis of this data set is ongoing. But you can see it will tie in to some of the work that I presented this evening in the area of San Giovanni Laterano, and also in the area in front of Santa Croce in Jerusalem. So this will be an update for a future lecture. The methodological approach of the geophysical surveys around the Eastern Caelian has been to use, where possible, multiple techniques suitable for deep investigation, which where possible are coupled with targeted coring. Over the coming months, the project will complete the extensive geophysical surveys and begin to bring the data into a project 3D GIS. Combining this information together with the rich archival data which is being collected from the many archives in Rome, the resource of the ArchaeoCitar database of the Soprintendenza, and the standing building surveys which are being conducted alongside the geophysical surveys, is aimed to answer some of the questions which I raised at the beginning of this presentation regarding the transformations of this key area of Rome. To conclude, to the east of the Basilica of San Giovanni, it's becoming clear from our recent work that the area may have been in some part used for quarrying, perhaps prior to construction of the Castronova, given its very close proximity. At the Caesarean Palace, there are still aspects to understand concerning the amphitheater, as well as the form of the Basilica Civica, both representations of private and public power. The potential of a structure that influenced the direction of the Aurelian wall, which we saw earlier, is also intriguing. So thank you for joining me this evening on this short and brief tour of the Caelian Hill. And I very, very much hope those of you online and here can join us again later this year when the project will hold its first major conference here at the BSR. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, for an enlightening and incredible journey through the Caelian, and one so richly illustrated as was promised to me earlier this week. Really, really impressive to see all this amazing new data. We have time for questions now. So for those of you here in person, feel free to raise your hand and we'll come around with a microphone. And for those online, feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A function. And we will get to them now. But first, I thought maybe I'll start off with one of my own questions, which is something, I suppose, broader than all of the detail you're going into. Every time I hear about this project, I'm amazed by the quantity of data that's getting captured, all of the different methodologies that are being used, how multidisciplinary it is. But at the same time, you talked about the limitations to it and all the variables and how some of it is quite specific to Rome. So I wonder, this methodological template that Rome Transformed is putting together, how applicable and viable will it to be picked up and used in other dense urban environments?
I think it is applicable elsewhere as well. I mean, the work builds upon the work of Ian Haynes and Paolo Livorani, taking some of the experiences we had working underneath San Giovanni Laterano, and then also the second phase of the project working underneath the hospital of San Giovanni Laterano as well, where we use more of these methodologies, perhaps more the laser scanning and the photogrammetry. The kind of step change for us in this project has been the very large scale geophysics, and in particular the inclusion also of coring, of chemical analysis, so taking water samples and things like that. Clearly Rome and the kind of the situations we're facing here are quite unique, but I think there's possibility for taking some of these, certainly the geophysics aspect elsewhere as well. Certainly colleagues who are working at University of Siena have just embarked upon a project in Siena itself. In the UK, colleagues are beginning work at York as well, employing large scale surveys using georadar within cities. It's feasible, we have the technology to do it now, but it's extremely complicated. And we both know very, very well from our project together, and I'll plug our Fileri Novi project on this occasion as well. But if we take the recent work which has been done by our colleagues there at the University of Ghent and Cambridge, you're looking at a very open field, and it represents a kind of a beautiful, kind of ideal situation which to use georadar. You're just going into the soil, and it's very clear, it's very, you don't have the electromagnetic waves coming from buildings nearby or passers-by, mobile phones and things like that. Working in an urban area is extremely challenging. So it represents a different challenge, but I think that's what the kind of the ERC project allows us to do, and that's why we have this opportunity to do it, to actually try and push some of these areas and try to develop some of these methodologies for looking at inside these kind of dense urban areas.
Brilliant. For those online, do feel free to enter questions into the chat, but first, perhaps questions from our room here in person. Robert, making Pepe jog all the way around the room.
Thanks, Steve. That was terrific. Just a specific question on the Villa Volkonsky. As far as you can tell from the geophysics you've done inside the garden, should we assume that all of that is sort of fill or post-antique fill, that the enormous rise in ground levels to the south of the aqueduct?
I think so, yes, at this stage. So we've also drilled 2 cores within the area as well, which I didn't show this evening. One was to the north, near to the columbarium, and the second one was drilled to the southwest, near to what is now the modern entrance to the villa. So just off the main road. I think, am I still online here?
For the online audience, but not.
All right. Oh, no bother. In which case, I think so. I think generally that would be my feeling at the moment. Certainly, looking at the results we got from the 200 megahertz antenna to the south of the aqueduct, there was nothing particularly structurally in there. We recently had John Shepherd present his book on Villa Volkonsky as well, and he showed the kind of the excavation of the swimming pool within the grounds, and the discovery of the columns which are now used in the so-called tempietto at the far end. Looking at the photographs which he kindly donated to our archive, they still seem to be, to me, filled. They don't seem to suggest an archaeological horizon within there. So I'm fairly convinced, and walking yourself kind of from the side of Villa Statilia, and when you go to the Republican tombs on that corner, the enormous raising kind of ground level there. So I do think a lot of that is I wouldn't say it's not natural. The area has been, a lot of material has been dumped in that area at some stage. The stories are always, it comes from underneath the excavations underneath St. Giovanni Laterano. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But the material has clearly come from somewhere. But it's an artificial accumulation where the villa is sitting, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly they'd never have built the aqueduct to that height if they could have just taken it through a hill, would they? So it must be post-antique.
And I think there's also, I mean, even in the volume of Lucas Croce, which you edited, we also have the comments also by Amanda Claridge in there as well, when she also accessed that corridor or aqueduct, which runs underneath that aqueduct as well. So we know even underneath there, but there is also another corridor which I think runs along the southern side of the aqueduct as well. So there is that considerable build-up.
Yeah. Great, thanks.
We also have a contribution in the Q&A from Taya Ravasi, who notes that as far as we understand from the archaeology of the tomb of Claudius Vitalis, there is evidence from some rising of the ground already in antiquity, but they're still working on it. Any other questions from our room? Yes, Claire.
Thanks so much, Steve. Can I ask you to speculate about that building that you said the wall might have gone round, the Aurelian wall might have gone round? And if you can do that, could you also say, why would it have avoided that building and then gone straight across the circus? Any ideas?
It's a good question. At the moment, no. It's, as I say, this is data we collected fairly recently. We are currently having a series of meetings with Teo as well, who's online here as well, discussing what some of the options are here. I kind of the thought of associating this structure to the Aurelian wall itself is a possibility, but also the depth at which we're seeing this structure, 3.5 to 4 meters, potentially suggests that perhaps it's earlier than what we're seeing. So hence the idea being perhaps it is an earlier structure which the wall in some way avoided. A tomb or some sort of structure like that is a possibility, I guess. As I said, these are kind of working hypotheses which we're talking about at the moment as to kind of what sort of structure would expect to be seen in that area. We know it was kind of quite urban, it was from the 3rd century AD. There was already quite a structures and what have you within that area. But I mean, as to the exact purpose or what it could be that they're trying to avoid, I'm not too sure. So it's just hopefully come back in October, we might have some more answers.
Yeah, look forward to that. Thanks.
And our wonderful chair of archaeology, Ian Haynes, who's the PI for the Rome Trans project, chips in and says the circus was probably not functioning when the wall was built. Nikos, I can see you've got a question relevant to the expected thickness of the walls for the Basilica. Please do type your question in because we're unable to put you on the microphone on this webinar. Do we have any other questions in the room in the meantime? Chris.
Thank you, Steve. You showed what's going on at San Giovanni and then what's going on at Santa Croce. Are you doing work presumably on the big park in the middle, or do you already have results for that, or what's going on there?
Yes, yeah, no, I've that's the grey area in the middle which I avoided. Yes, we are. So that area, which is the park of Cala Felice, we have been working there as well. I think if we'll be here a lot longer if I was to start discuss every single area we've been looking at. It's a very complicated area, essentially, is that there. You can see from the Aurelian walls on the inside, the incredible build-up again alongside the walls there. And then there's one section which was dug out midway along the walls in the park, where it continues down another 10 meters. And then we have a whole series of cores which come from that area as well. And then our project as well has also done a further coring in that area as well. We have a lot of information coming from outside the Aurelian walls in that area from the recent work of the Metro C line and the excavations of the new San Giovanni metro station. Inside that area again is very complicated. We have a very, very significant build-up. We've tried to do some survey with our colleagues from GeoStudi Astier with a very low frequency antenna. But again, this sheer noise of the area with this form of antenna makes it very difficult. We're inside an area of metal fence as well, which creates a lot of disturbance for us. We have done some ERT work within the park as well, which is producing some interesting results, but they're not so detailed. I've tried to kind of focus here on kind of some of the structures and some of the kind of those sort of structures which we've started to see within the data. Within the area of Cala Felice, we haven't seen that. But I think the data we've collected from the ERT will be useful in our study of the morphology of the area. The ERT allows us to get down to 8-9 meters. And once we begin to put that data together with the data that's being collected by people like Margherita Azzari from the geographers on the team, hopefully we can use that sort of information for the sort of more the change in topography of that area. So yes, we have looked at it. There's not very clear results, I would say, from that area yet. I think there is, as all of this data is, it's very challenging data. So yeah, we are looking at it, and I hope we've also alongside that surveyed it with the georadar as well along the long Viale Cala Felice as well. So we'll be able to compare some of our ERT data on the inside with that GPR data collected on the road as well. But say we've only just started kind of digging into that data metaphorically the last few weeks as we're having these kind of online discussions.
Thank you.
We've probably got time for one or two more questions. So if there's any more in our room, Nikos, I still can't see your question come through. I'm sorry. I might ask another one of my own then, which is again related to all of the data that's coming out of this project. And I'm really curious to see how we can meaningfully kind of compare results that are coming out of all this amazing, modern, cutting edge project that is providing so many, so much quantity of data to other areas of Rome, which have only seen, you know, traditional archaeology, limited study. How can we kind of piece together our understanding of the city when such different approaches are being implemented in different areas?
Yeah, I think it's the reason for choosing this area in particular is the as we've outlined in the description of the project, because it seems to be quite a key area. The arrival of the aqueducts into that area it seems to be quite fundamental in terms of the control of water and the control of power with this as well. I think it's taken a very large project to look at a very small part of the Eastern Caelian. So how far? Yeah, I think you could continue doing more, but it's vast, right? The amount of data we have to look at in terms of the cartography, in terms of the standing structures, things like that, and the specialization required to interpret and understand the data, the structure analysis of these buildings as well. So it is a smallish area within the city, but I mean, hopefully the ideas and some of the way we've applied this methodology across the project in that area may kind of help how we look at these other areas as well. But yeah, I think you have to take one area and try to focus in, and kind of it's a huge, when you just think about all the different data sets and all the different permutations within those as well. And we have a large team, but yeah, you know, it's the time, you know, these projects give you 5 years, and we're running already, so it's a challenge. But I think overly it could be kind of applied elsewhere as well, certainly this form of project.
We'll go to Nicolo for our last question online, who asks, as part of the project, are you going to do a detailed analysis of the architectural stratigraphy of the building's elevation?
Yes. Thank you, Nicolo, who is also been involved in the project as well. So yes, we have a team led by Teo, who was speaking in the chat as well, under guidance of wonderful Paolo Lavorani and Ian and many other people. So we have a lot of specialists involved in the project, and yes, there is a kind of analysis of all of these architectural elements, beginning from the area of Basilica of San Giovanni, and work that Nicolo himself has also been involved in around the hospital of San Giovanni as well. So yeah, obviously these are kind of structures which we're looking at as well. It goes back to what we were just saying about the vast quantities of data which you collect for these projects.
Brilliant. Well, with that, I think we'll give Steve a well-earned break and we can head upstairs for a rinfresco. So please do join me in thanking Steve one last time for this evening.